Look, I'll be straight with you about what happened, because honestly, I'm still processing how everything went so wrong. My name is Alara. I'm 26, and I thought I had this whole dating thing figured out until it completely exploded in my face. And the worst part? I'm still not convinced any of it was actually my fault. It had been 2 years since my last serious relationship crashed and burned in a spectacular blaze of lies and lukewarm apologies. 2 years of navigating the murky waters of modern dating, where men treated you like a menu item on an app, disposable, and easily forgotten. I'd learned the hard way that jumping into things too quickly, offering your heart and your body on a silver platter, only led to one thing: heartbreak. It left you feeling used, like a temporary convenience until someone better or easier came along. So, I'd built walls. Not impenetrable ones, but high enough to make a man prove he was willing to climb. That's how I found myself at my friend Talia's house party, nursing a glass of wine and expertly dodging the advances of a guy who thought his trust fund was a personality trait. The air was thick with cheap beer and loud music, a familiar scene I'd grown tired of. I was about to call it a night when I saw him. Julian. He wasn't like the others. While everyone else was getting wasted and shouting over the music, he was in a corner, actually having a real conversation with Talia's roommate. There was a stillness about him, a calm, stable energy that felt like a deep breath after being underwater for too long. He wasn't trying to be the center of attention. He just was. He had dark, thoughtful eyes that seemed to absorb everything around him and a smile that wasn't flashy, but genuine. Later, Talia dragged me over to introduce us, and the connection was immediate. We ended up talking for hours, huddled on her back porch where the music was a distant thrum. We talked about everything and nothing: our jobs in the city, the ridiculousness of corporate life, places we'd traveled, the subtle drama of our families. He was funny without trying too hard, insightful without being pretentious. He listened when I spoke, his eyes never leaving mine, asking follow-up questions that showed he was genuinely interested, not just waiting for his turn to talk. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not just looked at, but truly seen. By the end of the night, I was more than just attracted. I was intrigued. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without playing games. Usually, I'd make a guy sweat a little, a silly power play to feel in control, but something about Julian made me want to be direct. He texted me the next day. Not a needy had a great time. 5 minutes after leaving, nor a calculated 3-day wait. It was a simple, confident message asking if I was free for coffee that week. I found myself smiling at my phone, a giddy, unfamiliar feeling fluttering in my chest. I was actually looking forward to it. The coffee date was even better. 3 hours flew by without a single awkward silence. He was easy to be around, with a quiet confidence that was incredibly attractive. He told me about his passion for woodworking, the intricate tables and chairs he built in his spare time, and his eyes lit up in a way that told me this was his real passion. He asked me about my ambitions, my dreams beyond the 9-to-5 grind. He seemed interested in me, the person, not just the potential conquest. When he walked me to my car, he didn't lean in for a kiss or try to invite himself over. He just smiled that warm, genuine smile and said he'd had a great time and wanted to see me again. It was in that moment, watching him walk away, that the decision solidified in my mind. Julian wasn't just hookup material or casual dating material. He was the real deal, boyfriend potential, husband potential even. And I knew, from a long and painful history of mistakes, that men like him, men you actually want to keep, don't value what comes too easily. I thought of all the times I'd slept with a guy on the first or second date, thinking our amazing connection would translate into a relationship, only to be ghosted or relegated to a late-night booty call. This time would be different. This time, I had a plan. I was going to make Julian wait. I was going to make him work for it. I would show him, through patience and restraint, that I was a woman of substance, a prize worth earning. I wasn't going to be another disposable girl. I was going to be the one he took seriously, the one he introduced to his friends and family, the one he couldn't imagine losing. It was the perfect plan. Our second date was dinner at a cozy Italian place downtown, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles dripping wax onto old wine bottles. Julian was the perfect gentleman. He held the door, pulled out my chair, and listened with rapt attention as I vented about a frustrating project at work. He made me feel like the most interesting woman in the world. The entire evening felt effortless, cinematic. When he drove me home, I could feel the energy shift. The air in the car was charged with unspoken anticipation. As he walked me to my door, I knew he was going to try to kiss me, maybe ask to come up. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the first real test of my resolve. He turned to me on my doorstep, his dark eyes searching mine in the soft glow of the porch light. "I had a really wonderful time tonight, Alara." "Me too," I said, my voice softer than I intended. He leaned in slowly, and I met him halfway for a kiss. It was gentle at first, then deepened, filled with all the crackling chemistry that had been building between us. My body screamed at me to invite him in, to pull him closer, and let this perfect night end in a perfect, passionate way. But my mind, my strategic, wounded mind, held firm. I gently pulled back, placing a hand on his chest. "Julian," I began, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "I have to be honest. I really, really like you. And because I like you so much, I want to take this slow. I don't want to rush something that feels this important." I watched his face carefully, searching for any sign of frustration or disappointment. For a second, a flicker of it crossed his features, but it was quickly replaced by something else. Understanding. He nodded slowly, a small smile playing on his lips. "I get that," he said softly. "I respect that. To be honest, I feel the same way. I don't want to rush this either." He kissed me again, a sweet, lingering press of his lips that was full of promise and left me wanting so much more. As I watched him drive away, a wave of triumphant satisfaction washed over me. It was working. My plan was working perfectly. He wasn't just accepting my boundaries, he was mirroring them, valuing them. He saw me as someone to be cherished, not conquered. We fell into a beautiful rhythm over the next few weeks. He was consistent, attentive, and endlessly creative with our dates. We went to a jazz club, explored a vintage bookshop, took a hike to a scenic overlook, and cooked dinner together at my place. Each date was a masterclass in conversation and connection, and each night ended the same way, with intense, wanting kisses at my doorstep and my gentle shutdown before things could get too physical. Each time, he respected it without question, without making me feel guilty or weird. He was weaving himself into the fabric of my daily life. He'd text me good morning every day, call just to chat on his way home from work, and remember the tiniest details I'd mentioned in passing. One day, I casually mentioned my obsession with a specific kind of sour candy, and the next time I saw him, he had a bag of it waiting for me in his car. My friends were mesmerized. Talia, who had seen me through countless heartbreaks, couldn't stop gushing. "He's so attentive, Alara. Where did you find this guy?" About a month in, Julian started hinting at a more official future. It was never pushy, just casual mentions. "My coworker is having a barbecue next month, we should go." Or, "My friends are dying to meet the woman I can't shut up about." I could tell he was getting more invested, falling deeper, and I knew, with a certainty that felt both powerful and validating, that it was because I was making him wait. I was becoming more valuable to him with every day he couldn't have all of me. The physical tension was a tightly coiled spring between us, and our make-out sessions were growing more frantic, more desperate. It was getting harder for both of us to stop. But that, I told myself, was just proof that my strategy was working. He wanted me more because he couldn't have me yet. It was basic psychology. The beauty of the plan was that Julian was falling for exactly the image I wanted him to see. Alara, the thoughtful, emotionally mature woman who valued a deep connection above all else. He started saying things that felt like trophies for my efforts. "It's so refreshing," he told me one night, his hand holding mine across the table, "to meet someone who isn't in a rush, who understands the value of building a real foundation. You're so different from other girls I've dated." Every time he said something like that, a proud, secret smile would touch my lips. I felt so smart, so in control. I had finally cracked the code. But there was another side to my life, a parallel world that Julian knew nothing about. While I was carefully curating this image of patient virtue for him, I wasn't about to become celibate. I had needs, and I was handling them. There was Bryce. Bryce and I had been hooking up on and off for months before I met Julian. He was a bartender with a great body and zero interest in commitment, which made him perfect. He was fun, convenient, and utterly meaningless, the polar opposite of what I had with Julian. He was a physical release, a way to scratch an itch so I could maintain my composure and stick to the plan. And it wasn't just Bryce. Sometimes, when I was bored or frustrated with the slow pace I'd imposed on myself, I'd swipe through the dating apps. A match here, a flirty conversation there, and occasionally, a late-night rendezvous with a handsome stranger whose name I'd forget by morning. In my mind, it wasn't cheating. Julian and I weren't exclusive. We hadn't had the talk. We were technically still just dating. I was operating in a gray area, one I had carefully constructed to suit my needs. I was meticulous about keeping these two worlds separate. I never posted anything on social media. I never brought it up in conversation. I always made sure I was available whenever Julian wanted to see me. As far as he knew, I was just this naturally slow-moving girl who valued emotional intimacy over physical gratification. I was playing a part, and I was playing it brilliantly. By month 2, I could tell Julian was getting antsy. Not in a demanding way, but I could see the effort it was taking him to be patient. He'd suggest we spend more time at his place, try to plan more intimate date nights, and gently test the waters about how much longer I wanted to wait. I kept my answers vague and romantic. I just love how our connection is growing, I'd say. I don't want to rush something so special. The truth was, I was getting antsy, too. Julian was gorgeous, and all the built-up tension was driving me crazy. There were nights I'd leave him at my door and have to take a cold shower just to calm down. But I knew I had to stick to the plan. The longer I waited, the more he'd appreciate it when it finally happened. He wouldn't just be having sex with me. He'd be reaching the finish line of a marathon he'd patiently run. He would feel like he'd earned something precious, something worth waiting for. 3 months in, Julian was more invested than any man I'd ever dated. He'd left a toothbrush at my apartment. He was talking about weekend trips we could take in the fall, hinting about me meeting his family who lived a few hours away. I could practically see the word girlfriend forming on his lips. Everything was going exactly according to plan. I had built the perfect foundation, and soon, very soon, I would let him move in. 3.5 months into whatever we were calling this, I was feeling confident. Victorious, even. Julian had been dropping heavier hints about making things official, and I could tell he was gearing up to have that conversation. He'd started using we more often when talking about the future. Just last week, he'd asked what I was doing for the holidays, a question that hung in the air with the weight of unspoken commitment. That Friday night, he invited me over to his apartment to cook dinner together. This wasn't unusual. We'd been doing these cozy domestic things more often lately. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was the way he'd suggested we open the nice bottle of wine he'd been saving, or how he'd cleaned his apartment so thoroughly it gleamed. I had a feeling tonight might be the night. The night he'd finally ask me to be his girlfriend. We were in his kitchen, the scent of garlic and basil filling the air. I was chopping tomatoes while he sautéed onions, a comfortable, domestic dance we fell into easily. I was feeling relaxed and happy. The wine was good, the conversation was flowing, and Julian kept giving me these looks, soft, adoring looks that made me feel like the only woman in the world. I was mentally preparing my response for when he brought up exclusivity. I'd act a little surprised, thoughtful, and then agree, as if it were a conclusion I was only just reaching myself. Then somehow, and I honestly can't remember who brought it up first, we started talking about our dating histories. Not in a heavy, interrogative way, just a casual conversation about past relationships and funny dating stories. Julian was being sweet and vulnerable, sharing anecdotes about his ex-girlfriends that were more charming than bitter. The whole thing had this intimate, getting-to-know-you deeper vibe. I was feeling so comfortable, so connected to him, that I started opening up more than I usually would. I told him about how I hadn't been in a serious relationship in a couple of years, how I'd been taking time to figure out what I really wanted. He seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions about my perspective on dating. That's when he asked something that caught me off guard. So how did you handle being single for so long? It must have been tough. It wasn't a judgmental question, just one of genuine curiosity about my life before him. And because I was feeling so close to him, and because the wine had made my tongue a little looser than usual, I decided to be honest. Or, what I thought was honest enough. Oh, I said with a casual shrug. I had some casual arrangements here and there. Nothing serious, just a way to not be completely alone. I saw something shift in his expression. It wasn't dramatic, just a subtle change in his body language, a stillness that hadn't been there a moment before. He stopped stirring the onions. Arrangements? He repeated, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. Sensing a change in the atmosphere, I tried to backpedal, to explain. Yeah, you know, friends with benefits type situations. It wasn't about feelings. We're both adults. We both have needs. I thought he'd understand, but instead of being cool about it, Julian got this weird look on his face. Were these arrangements recent? He asked, his voice very quiet. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was starting to do the math. I tried to keep things light, laughing it off. Don't worry about it. The past is the past. What matters is right now. But he wasn't letting it go. He put the spoon down and turned to face me fully, leaning against the counter. The playful mood had completely evaporated. Alara, I'm just trying to understand. Then he asked the question that made my stomach drop into my shoes. Are you talking about while we've been seeing each other? The way he said it so carefully controlled, so devoid of emotion, told me this conversation was about to go somewhere I didn't want it to go. I could have lied. I should have lied. But I'd already said too much, and the wine had eroded my defenses. So, I told him the truth. Yeah, I admitted, trying to sound nonchalant. There was some overlap, but it wasn't a big deal, Julian. We weren't exclusive. It had nothing to do with you and me. He just stood there, his face unreadable, processing that information. I rushed to explain, to make him understand my logic. Those other guys were just physical. They were meaningless hookups. It had nothing to do with my feelings. What we have is emotional. It's real. That's why I wanted to take things slow with you. To protect it. Instead of being reassured, his expression hardened. He started asking more specific questions, his voice still low and steady, but now with an edge of steel I'd never heard before. How many guys are we talking about? How recently did this happen? Are any of them people you're still in contact with? Each question felt like a blow, like he was building a case against me in a courtroom. I was getting more and more frustrated with every answer I was forced to give. Why does that matter? I finally snapped. This has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with us, he said, his voice finally rising slightly. You've been telling me for 3.5 months that you wanted to take things slow because you really liked me and wanted to build something serious. You let me believe you were being careful with your heart, with our connection. But you weren't taking things slow with anyone else, were you? That's when I realized how bad this was. I could see the disappointment in his eyes, the way he was pulling away from me emotionally, even though we were standing only a few feet apart in his beautiful, clean kitchen. All those months of careful planning, all that time I'd spent building the perfect image of myself as this thoughtful, deliberate woman, it was all crumbling to dust because of one honest, stupid conversation. The silence in that kitchen was suffocating, broken only by the forgotten sizzle of the onions burning in the pan. I could see Julian trying to process what I'd told him, his face a mask of confusion and hurt. I was desperately trying to figure out how to fix this, how to rewind the last 10 minutes. I genuinely didn't understand why he was making such a huge deal out of this. What did he expect? That I'd been living like a nun, patiently waiting for him to grace my life? You're completely misunderstanding. I tried again, my voice pleading. Those other guys were just physical releases. Like going to the gym. They were meaningless encounters that had nothing to do with my actual feelings. But what you and I have is real and deep. That's exactly why I wanted to wait with you. I was honoring it. But Julian just kept shaking his head, like nothing I said made any sense to him. You're telling me you respect me so much that you won't sleep with me, he said, and I could finally hear the anger creeping into his voice, sharp and cold. But you'll sleep with guys you barely know, guys who are meaningless. How does that work, Alara? In what world does that show respect? I was getting frustrated because he was being so black and white. It's not that simple, I insisted. Real relationships are complicated. I was trying to navigate between my physical needs and building something meaningful with you. Why can't you see that I was actually trying to protect what we had by being careful with it? The tension in his kitchen was unbearable. I could feel everything I'd worked for, every carefully laid brick of our foundation slipping away. So, I made a decision that seemed logical at the time. A last-ditch effort to save the night. To save us. I closed the distance between us, put my hands on his arms, and looked up at him earnestly. "Maybe you're right," I said softly. "Maybe we've waited long enough. All this talking, it's just made me realize how much I care about you. I'm ready to take the next step, Julian. If you are." I expected him to look relieved, or happy, or at least intrigued. I thought this was the solution, the ultimate proof that he was the one I truly wanted. But instead of pulling me closer, he actually took a step back, dislodging my hands. He looked at me as if I'd just proven the very point he was trying to make. "Now you're ready?" he asked, his voice dripping with a cynicism that stung. "Right now? After this conversation? Suddenly you don't need to wait anymore." "No, it's not like that," I stammered, panic rising in my throat. Realizing how much our connection means to me, how much I could lose, it changed my perspective. But he wasn't buying it. Not for a second. "No," he said, his voice flat. "It feels like you're only offering this because you got caught. It feels like damage control, not genuine desire. And I don't want to be damage control, Alara." That's when I knew it was over. I could see him shutting down completely, the warmth in his eyes extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard disappointment. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. We were supposed to be getting closer, becoming official. Instead, he was looking at me like I was a stranger, a manipulative fraud he'd only just met. He was quiet for a long moment, the silence stretching into an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was completely devoid of emotion. "I think you should go home," he said. "I need some time to think about all of this. Julian, please, please, Alara, just go." I knew right then that I'd lost him. All those months of being patient and understanding, all the effort he had put in, and he was throwing it all away because of his own insecurities and his rigid, outdated worldview. I had been honest with him when he asked a direct question, and somehow that made me the bad guy. I barely slept that night, replaying the conversation over and over, trying to pinpoint the exact moment it all went wrong. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. He was being completely unreasonable. What man gets this upset about a woman having a past, or in this case, a present that didn't involve him? I gave him the weekend to cool off. On Monday, I sent a carefully worded text. "I hope we can talk this through like adults." His response came hours later. It was short and distant. "Not yet. I'm still processing." By Tuesday, I was desperate. I'd called him on my lunch break, but it went straight to voicemail. On Friday, exactly 1 week after everything had blown up, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I drove to his apartment after work, unannounced. We needed to have a real conversation, not this childish avoidance. He opened the door and he looked tired, defeated. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet finality that felt so much worse. I launched into a prepared speech about how I understood his concerns, but he was overreacting, about how what we had was special and worth fighting for, about how my actions were meant to protect our connection, not disrespect him. He listened to every word without interrupting. When I was finished, he just sighed. "Do you want to come in?" For a second, a spark of hope ignited. But when we sat down in his living room, a palpable distance between us on the sofa, I knew this wasn't a reconciliation. It was a formal execution. "I've been thinking about this all week," he began, his voice heavy. "And I don't think we want the same things, Alara." The conversation went on for over an hour, but it was useless. Nothing I said made any difference. He was polite but completely firm. He said he respected my right to make my own choices, but that those choices had consequences. And the consequence was that he couldn't be with someone who operated the way I did. "It's about trust," he said finally, looking at me with sad, resigned eyes. "I don't trust you. I don't trust that the person I spent the last 3 months getting to know was real, and I can't build a relationship on that." I left his apartment that night knowing it was really over. 3.5 months of building something I thought was real, destroyed by his inability to handle a modern woman with a life of her own. It's been 10 months now since Julian ended things, and I'm still angry. I tried dating again, but it's been terrible. Word somehow got around our mutual friend group about what happened, his version, of course, and I started getting weird reactions from people. Whispers, sideways glances. Talia tried to defend me, but it was no use. People had made up their minds. I was the villain. The worst part was finding out that people were talking about me behind my back. Apparently, Julian had shared his side of the story with a few close friends, and they'd told their girlfriends, and suddenly everyone in our extended social circle had an opinion on my sex life. About 6 months after we broke up, I ran into him at the grocery store. My heart seized in my chest. He was with a girl. Honestly, there was nothing special about her. She was kind of plain looking, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, definitely not as put together as I am. But the way he was looking at her while she was picking out an avocado, it was with a gentle, unguarded adoration that made me feel physically sick. That was the look I had worked so hard for. And he was giving it away for free to this nobody. This is what he chose over me. I found out later, through the grapevine, that they'd been together for 3 months and were already talking about getting a place together. 3 months, and she was getting the commitment I couldn't get from him after 3.5. It's honestly insulting. The really messed up part is how I keep hearing about how happy Julian seems now, how he's in a much better place, as if I was some kind of disease he had to recover from. Excuse me? I was the one who was trying to build something real with him. Apparently, I was the problem. I've been going to therapy, not because I think I did anything wrong, but because I needed help dealing with how unfairly I was treated. My therapist keeps pushing me to examine my role in what happened and take accountability for my choices. But I don't see how I'm supposed to take accountability for Julian's insecurities and double standards. The thing that really gets to me is how everyone acts like I was supposed to be some perfect, innocent maiden who'd never been with anyone before Prince Julian showed up. That's not realistic and it's not fair. I've had to basically start over socially because our old friend group chose sides. And guess who they chose? The guy who couldn't handle dating a woman with experience. Then, about 8 months after our breakup, I saw it on social media. A picture of them on a mountaintop, her hand held up to the camera, a diamond sparkling on her finger. They were engaged. Engaged after less than a year together. Meanwhile, I'd spent almost 4 months meticulously building a foundation with him and got nothing but heartbreak and a ruined reputation for my efforts. The engagement news broke something in me. Not because I still wanted him, but because it proved I'd been right all along about what he really wanted. He didn't want a real, complex partner. He wanted a simple, easy story. He wanted someone who would stroke his ego and make him feel like a prize. And people were eating it up, commenting, "Congratulations, and so happy for you both." Like this was some beautiful love story instead of the consolation prize it so clearly was. The final insult came a few months later when I heard they'd gotten married. A small, intimate ceremony. The kind of wedding I'd always dreamed of. I realized then that I'd lost more than just a boyfriend. I'd lost my entire vision of what my life was supposed to look like. It was all gone because he couldn't handle the truth about who I really was. So here I am, almost a year later, still single and still furious. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I live in a world where men say they want honesty but punish you for it. Where being a real, complex human being is somehow less valuable than being a perfect, simple fantasy. I'm not the same person I was when I met Julian. I'm harder now, more guarded. And maybe that's for the better. Maybe I needed to learn that not everyone deserves access to the real me. I've learned my lesson, though. The next guy I get serious with isn't going to hear about my past at all. Not because I'm ashamed, but because apparently men can't handle the truth. If Julian had just focused on our relationship instead of interrogating me about my history, we'd probably be married by now. Instead, he's playing house with some woman who was either smart enough to lie about her past or just boring enough not to have one. But I know who I am and what I bring to the table. Some people just aren't mature enough to handle a woman like me. The next guy who wants to be with me is going to have to earn it in ways Julian never did. And if he can't handle the full truth about who I am, then he doesn't deserve me at all. I'm done settling for men who want to judge me. Some of us are just too real for this fake world.